I really don't know how to say this, but sitting at some of the more recent meetings has been very painful for you, for me, for the board. I think what we really need to do is take advantage of the season and understand that what we really need to tap into, and I've lived with it for 34 years as superintendent, the amount of goodwill that exists in this community is staggering. I see it in working with teachers. I see it in working with this Board of Education and their predecessors in their positions. I see it in working with parents and teachers. I see it in the classroom with kids every single day. The energy, the love of life, the recognition of all of the wonderful things that go on in this world needs to be celebrated. And I think we all need to just kind of sit back at this time of the year and just take a deep breath. And whenever you have that opportunity, give somebody a hug and recognize the absolute incredible, wonderful goodwill that exists within this Rockville Center community. I won't say it starts here, but we are part of that goodwill. And I know that when Tara was talking before about the opportunities that people have, it's a very scary thing to stand at that microphone for many people to get up and share with us. We're here to make the district better.
We're going to move on to policies. We have a couple of policies out right now, actually 3. We have one and a form in stage 1 that Chris Powers, who I would like to welcome to our meeting again, the district's attorney, had done some work with us. The last time, the way we left it was we were reviewing policy 6480, and that's tutoring professional services for a fee, remuneration, or consideration. And we kind of started by acknowledging that the policy we had needed to be separated by tutoring, coaching, and also music instruction because they didn't all function the same way. So what we had mentioned in the last meeting was that out of information that was given to us from the public, we started to really take a hard look at one of these policies that had been put out and trying to make a clear distinction, determination that any person who's working in the district that's tutoring a child, that child could not be in their class, as an example, for a teacher. When it came to coaching, if we hired a coach for a team in Rockville Center, that they would not be outside being offered money or being paid money outside of that team to privately train those same children. When it came to music instruction, it was the same thing, maybe giving voice lessons and then having to do with the auditions. So this is where we're at with the policy. We did separate it into those areas. It still needs some work on our part to make sure that all of this language is very clear. So I'm going to open it up to the board. We could talk about 6480, the actual policy, not the form right now. And on page 2, number 5, the designee would disqualify an employee from being assigned a coaching position at the district without that prior approval.
Correct.
So there's a consequence in there if it were not reported.
Mm-hmm. Sure, so, just fiddling around with number 5, right now, under coaching, page 2, the private coaching and/or training of a Rockville Center student without receiving prior approval of the superintendent or his designee will disqualify the employee from being assigned to coaching. So just thinking about that, I draw back to the Little League coach. It's, a mom or dad coaching a Little League team. They didn't receive compensation for that. Perhaps what we need to do with sub 5 is the prior coaching and or training for compensation must be brought to the attention of the superintendent of schools. So there are a lot of different scenarios out here that you're trying to address with this policy. That's why I thought it'd be important to break it down by tutoring, coaching, and music instruction.
Yeah, I
as well.
agree.
No, it's definitely
Coaching
helpful.
is
Made
the
a
most
big difference.
That definitely
Made a big
helps.
difference.
Yes.
It's much easier.
So with the board's permission for number 5 under coaching, I think we should add the word for compensation.
Compensation.
Is it really necessary for the superintendent of schools to know that a mom or dad was a Little League coach 5 years ago, and now that kid is potentially on that coach's team? I don't think that's what you're trying to achieve here. I think what you're trying to achieve is you have kids that are receiving training, they're paying a coach $50 a session. Now that person is actually in a position to decide whether the kid makes the team or whether the kid's going to get playing time. I think that's what you're trying to address, not the Little League moms and dads.
I think we're also trying to address, it's not just private coaching. If a coach is compensated for coaching a student in any way, we need to consider, doesn't have to be private on his level or her level. They could work for somebody who coaches them. It could be something like that.
I think we
Isn't that
actually
still-
addressed that, sir, in number 4 for coaches. A Rockville Center school district coach who is associated with an outside sporting program in which district students
Right.
participate shall provide notice. So we kind of contemplated
Right.
that as well.
Okay.
That's where that form
A lot of
comes in
moving
again.
parts here, and you're just
Yeah.
trying to get it right.
So then at that point, are we saying that they can coach someone, they just have to let the athletic director know? Is that what you're saying in that?
They would have to then fill out the form.
And
And
the
then
form
who
that goes
makes,
to the
to
superintendent.
superintendent? And
Superintendent.
so if so then the policy's still leaving that open that that could happen?
Correct.
Okay, because that was one of the questions that we were discussing.
Right.
Right.
About not
It's-
having that, the ability
It's very
of
much
that.
like the old form. It still
Correct,
leaves a
right.
very gray area
Correct,
for for someone's judgment.
correct.
What we're trying to do is, if you, in your capacity, receive compensation from a kid, or more importantly, more likely, their mom or dad, we need to know about that. That's what it comes down to, so that a decision can be made as to whether or not you're in a position to be fair and equitable to the students that are coming before you, potentially making the team.
I think we run into problems with the old policy, and I think this policy will have more opportunity to run into problems. Because I really don't read it that much different than the old policy. And the old policy led us into some problems.
When we created the form, last meeting, we said it was supposed to be like a catch-all, right? I know we're not looking at the form right now, but what in this policy reads as if the form is just for a catch-all?
Well, we tried to capture in the form, in general terms, what the policy is laying out. That's what we're trying to do in the stream. You don't want, for every kid who is possibly receiving these services and every coach to have to sign off on a 4-page document. So you tried to streamline it into, how do you know this kid? Are you receiving compensation? That's why we came up with these forms. And these forms also are similar to your prior forms, but they're broken down to 3 separate
Right.
forms as well. So, I looked at other school districts and what they have done with tutoring, and none of them go into the level of detail that your prior policy even had. So
Right.
you had your prior policy, which was in existence until a month or 2 ago. We've even expanded upon that. So these conditions that you are considering are fairly stringent at this point. But what you're trying to do is to make sure that everyone knows what their responsibilities are. I think I get it from having been here last month, which is, if you're getting paid, we need to know about it so we can make an informed decision. That's kind of what you're trying to do.
Can we make that language more clear to say that you cannot be, I think what we're afraid of is that the form is allowing, in some case, it to happen as long as you fill out the form.
Right.
And I think we were under the impression the form would be for those other weird circumstances, like I used to teach in Garden City to Kelly Barry, and now she moved to Rockville Center, and so did I, and I should report that I took money at that time from her, and I just want to report that there's a history of payment for services between me and this family. I think I thought the form was going to be that for
Okay.
reporting, for good information for us, so that we can say, we know that this has happened, and it's not current, but we know it. What I'm worried about is, we're trying to make our policy very tight to say, if you are, and I'll use coaching, if you are coaching a Rockville Center team, you are also not taking money on the side to privately train those children. I don't care if you fill out the form.
Right.
I think that
Yes.
needs
That's
to
the
get
question.
Yes.
across.
Right, that's the question.
That we don't want the form to be the way to get around it.
Sure.
Right
So-
now, it just moves it to the superintendent, that
Yeah.
decision,
Right.
whether or
Right.
not they
Right.
can do it.
Right.
The other form did also.
And the
But
other
it
forms-
should, in
But it
in
leaves
those
it-
cases like Tara just pointed out, right? We need
still need the
something in
form.
case
Yes.
something,
We
because we,
still
like
need
we
the
said last
form.
time, we can't
100%.
possibly dictate every possible future.
Right, because we need good information.
Here's the key distinction with the newest forms as opposed to the old form, and it's 3 lines down. It now reads, I request permission to tutor, to coach, to provide music lessons. Your prior
The old
forms
form
didn't
just
say
said-
that. Your prior form said, I'm going to be tutoring. And that was a major problem. So by changing to I request permission, the condition preceding to actually doing that is the superintendent saying, you can do this. And that is a major shift.
Okay.
I know we're jumping to the form, so let's go back to the policy. Any other issues? Again, I think we all agree we want to tighten up however we can. And I really do appreciate
Yes,
all the
thank you
work they
very
did, and I
much.
really think that we're headed in the,
Much better.
we're headed in the right direction.
It's much clearer.
We just want to make it as clear as possible, that's the goal.
And on page 3, where it says superintendent of schools, the last sentence, or his or her designee, staff members in violation of this policy may be subject to discipline. So Dr. Johnson, how does discipline work if a staff member breaks a policy? Is there a continuum? What does that look like?
We have to do it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, if they do it willfully, if they do it, I mean, what we do is we conduct an investigation, and on the basis of that, we decide if there is going to be a penalty assigned to the teacher or to the staff member.
And who does that? The superintendent administration does
It's
that?
usually assigned to somebody, either that, it can be done by an outside person such as one of our attorneys, or it can be done, and we routinely do it. One of the assistant superintendents would be involved in that, any one of the three, depending on what the problem is and who it might be or what type of staff member it may be. We would do an investigation, and then we would have to act upon the particular circumstances that surrounded the action.
And then superintendent and administration from that gives the discipline action? Right.
Yes, if it's warranted.
I'm a little confused, because if you violate a school district policy, why shouldn't there be a certain penalty? Should it not be a variable? If you violate what is the rule of your employment, why would there be a variable in the punishment?
You mean the words may be disciplined? Is that-
And even,
why
you know,
I'm
if
asking.
you violate the policy or any policy of the school district, shouldn't there be a certain punishment, whatever it may be? I don't understand how it
Well, then you
can be.
should write that into the policy.
Well, that's
Just
why I'm,
say
that's
are
why I'm
subject to
asking.
That's what I'm
That's
saying.
why
I
I'm
think it
asking.
should be, you
Yeah.
know, this
Are.
is going to happen
Will
if
be.
you violate
Will
a school
be.
district policy. I don't think it should be
May,
up in the
right,
air.
yeah, right.
So what you can do is, instead of saying staff members in violation of this policy may be subject to discipline, you can say will be subject to discipline. The discipline comes in a lot of different forms. So
Right.
if it's coaching, for example, coaching appointments are on an annual basis. You could be the greatest coach in the world, but you're not guaranteed to come back a second year. Or during the course of the season, there are other sanctions that can be imposed, like you're not going to be participating in sports. If it's really bad and you catch someone doing something like stealing from you, as there's been a complete manipulation, not only would they be in trouble for potential coaching responsibilities, but there's something else out there called 3020A, which is they can actually lose their job if it's that bad. So when you ask for us to lock in, sir, to exact sanction, that's going to be driven by the severity of the bad act.
What if they're doing?
And there is a bit of a continuum there. There certainly is.
But there's an acknowledgement, if you break
if you say
policy, there's
will,
discipline.
Right.
Versus may.
There's still,
In the simplest
Yeah,
form,
yeah.
if you break policy, you would be disciplined.
Sure, will be subject to discipline still allows for discretion.
Correct.
Right.
It does.
Yes,
And that's any,
yes.
well, that's any
Right.
policy or anything that happens
Right.
in a school district.
right.
Right.
Chris, I just need to reiterate what you just said.
Sure.
There are very, very specific guidelines that are established by the state of New York under 3020A on how we are to proceed with regard to any kind of discipline, even if it involves a violation of policy. And anything more than a counseling letter. Once we get beyond that, we're into 3020A, and all of the laws and guidelines associated with those laws kick in with regard to how somebody can be disciplined. Now, it's not, that's for teachers, and for everybody else, it's Part 75 of the laws, of the civil service laws. So this is all prescribed, John, in New York State law. Chris, you may want to comment on that?
Sure. So if you are a tenured teacher or administrator and you commit a bad act, whether it's a policy like this or something really severe, you have some protection called Section 3020A of the Education Law, which is a full-blown hearing. Hearing officer is actually appointed is not an employee of the district. The Board of Education has a limited role during most of the proceedings.
Chris,
which
could I
is-
ask you to just get that
Sure.
mic in front of me? We have some
Sure.
parents that can't hear. Thank you, some guests.
Sure. So 3020A lays out, if you're going to sanction someone, Dr. Johnson is correct. If you're going to put a letter of reprimand in their file, believe it or not, a letter of reprimand requires for tenured teachers and administrators that you go through the 3020A process. A fine, a suspension, certainly a termination, they're all subject to the 3020A analysis. You can put a critical letter in a person's file, which is, hey, don't do this again. That does not require the 3020A process. So there's something else out there called, and this is a state issue, which is a Part 83 referral. Part 83 is if someone commits an act of moral turpitude, superintendent is required by statute, by regulation, to notify the state education department, which means that they take a look at the act as to whether or not it will constitute an act of moral turpitude for which the person's certification to teach or to be an administrator could actually be pulled. That's for the worst of the worst. So if you have someone that violates a policy like this on a low level, they're not subject to losing their job over something like this. Could coaching be taken away? It could be. Could they receive a critical memo? They could. But when you start to climb the ladder and to get into 3020A, first of all, it's very expensive to do it. You do them all the time, but it's very expensive to do. And if the sanction that you're seeking is, we want to put you on notice not to do this again, you can get that with a critical memo without going to the level of a letter of reprimand. So Dr. Johnson's correct. There's a whole process if you're actually going to impose a sanction such as that which is identified in 3020A. The 75s that Dr. Johnson's making reference to would be for non-instructionals, would be for custodians, cafeteria workers, groundsmen. They don't have those same kinds of protections that teachers and administrators have that have tenure. So it's a whole process. So if you were to lock into, you're going to receive the following, there's
No.
something else that's out there, it's called the education law. So I would not advise that you lock into exactly what the discipline's going to be, sir.
Agreed.
Education language usually says may be subject to discipline. Just I know in my own work that most of the policies that I follow, it says may be subject to discipline.
May?
Maybe. That's what every policy that I know that I've worked on, that's what it does say.
Uncomfortable with that, but if that's what you all.
No, it
No, I
can,
think we already
we can
said.
say
Yeah.
will, but I'm just saying that's not an uncommon
Yeah.
language, right, Chris?
No, it's not. It's not. Will is a little stronger.
Yeah,
It's stronger.
right,
But
so
it
that's
still-
what
But it
it's,
still
builds in
gives
discretion.
latitude.
Right.
It
There
still
should
gives
be some
latitude.
recourse
Yeah.
there. You should have some punishment to it.
I think if you get this policy out there, I'll clearly work with the board to nail it so we're very clear on what they're doing. If you make it very clear that if you violate this policy, it's going to be very clear that it's going to be a big deal. And that's very important that you let the employees know that.
Well, that comes back to the communication too, right, that we were talking about. Just once this is policy, then it becomes incumbent upon all of us to make sure that, administration really, to make sure that staff is aware.
Sure?
Number 7 on coaching, district parents or students may not be solicited during school hours, on school grounds or through district resources for coaching and or training services. I think we live in a world where that makes no sense. It should be any time, not on your email, not on your text. It shouldn't be permitted to be solicited. It's just, I don't know how to enforce that, but that's kind of odd for me to read that. So they can solicit after hours. That's what this is saying.
Right,
That's-
it's giving
That's
it's giving an
that's
open
what-
window.
That's what we said last time.
Yeah,
They have
I
that
thought we said
circle
that
on
last time
school
too.
grounds.
May not be solicited through district resources. I
Right.
think that's where we had left off, right? Like, that was really what we were looking.
Yeah, I have that
Sure.
still circled.
Not during school
but
hours
then-
or on school.
Nowadays,
In other
coaches
words-
have kids' emails and parents' emails and all that. So are we allowing solicitation from 6 till 11 at night?
No, we shouldn't be giving an
No,
open
not at
window.
So,
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That needs to be
We said
clear.
that. I thought we said that.
But I think you have to watch that, and I'll tell you why. Which is, you are allowed to go out and to have a separate form of income. So let's say I'm an English teacher, and I have 3 kids at home, and I want to be able to tutor. Elsewhere.
Speaking,
Use
Chris,
mine.
the
Here,
mic.
Chris, use mine.
Thank you. You want to? That's much better. Thank you. So what you may want to do is, here's a consideration for you, which is you're an English teacher, you have 3 kids at home, you are someone that is capable of tutoring kids, you start a website and you say, I'm a good tutor, and if you like to have me tutor your kid, here's my email address. I think what we can do here is we can say, you're not allowed to directly solicit Rockville Center parents. I think for you to put a blind across the board, you're not allowed to try and get any additional work anywhere, I think that would be a problem.
No, it definitely is for Rockville Center students, my concern.
So what we could do, sir, is say district parents and students may not be solicited, Rockville Center parents and students may not be solicited by staff members. That I think will fly. That I think will fly.
District doesn't mean that, Chris. District parents or students, you're saying, by saying the words Rockville Center, that alters that?
I think it clarifies it, sir.
So let me just ask you as well, as a
Sure.
former track coach myself, who would speak to students during the day and see if I'd get them to run on my team. District parents or students may not be solicited during school hours on school grounds or through district resources for coaching. It doesn't say anything about outside remuneration or anything
You
like that.
mean about
So-
like private coaching for?
Yeah,
for-
but this
for a
doesn't
fee?
read that way. This
Right.
reads as though I can't go up to a kid during
And
the
see
school
that
day
coaching
and
them.
say, I want you to come out for my
Right.
team.
Compensation.
So we just need to add that, I think, for
Okay, so
outside
if you're looking to
compensation or
get kids to
something.
join your team,
Right.
you're going to walk in and say, I need you.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm
so-
soliciting them during the
right.
day, but I think that just means, I think that needs a.
For like the private.
Yeah, for private
For
or
private
outside.
coaching.
Yeah, outside compensation.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
You're soliciting.
I mean, if you read it, the strict letter
Yeah.
of the law, I would just happen to read it that way.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
No, I agree.
I think if you want to make it clear, that's
Yeah.
the better way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coach.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at, any other thing from the board?
Carol, can I ask Carol Rosetto a question? What if the, I don't know if you want to go to the mic quickly. What are you finding that your colleagues in other districts are doing around this type of a policy?
Some are not doing anything, some have policies. I do know that some of the districts actually want their varsity staff to build their programs, so they permit the varsity staff to run their youth programs in their district for pay. So
Do you see it both ways?
it kind of runs the gamut, yeah.
Just always looking to see what's out there and what other people
Yeah.
are doing around us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're at stage one, and we could move it forward with some changes. I think we should start to work towards that, because this is looking so different to start than it was when we were at stage one last time, so. You have a question?
Maybe Mrs. Rosetto could come up and just talk a little bit about the policy as it exists now and just comment on it if she sees we're going in the right direction or want to direct us in any other way.
The recent changes.
Yeah. Carol, any comment on the recent changes?
Well, originally, when I looked it over, number one, I had said, what happens, I trained Joe last year, and now he's trying out for my team this year. I didn't know he was trying out for my team this year. Does this statement really cover that? So specifics. I know sometimes you don't know who's trying out for your team. Probably worse for the fall sports than the winter and the spring, because you have an opportunity to know who's coming out. And then I just wrote on number 4, I just wrote clarification. So is this for if you don't coach people, if you don't coach people directly? So did this rule still applies to people that run programs but not coach the students directly? Because one of the sentences says on your team now. So those are just 2 things that I thought of. Right, doesn't catch, yeah.
So I think that question pertains to if somebody owns or runs an outside kind of training service, but isn't directly the person coaching the child, how does that fall into the policy? That's the question you're asking.
Correct.
Right.
Sure, so let me take a crack at number 1. Right now it reads, no district coach may coach and/or train, such as travel team, sports camp, private training, a student for compensation when said student is currently on his or her school team. I thought about that. And I was thinking that one of the things you could add is, or is eligible to try out for a team. But now you're kind of like projecting out as well. If you're trying to make this as stringent as possible, that's how you could accomplish it, or eligible to try out for the team.
But then do you go all the way back to second
Right,
grade? I could
yeah.
be eligible.
Well, that was what we
who
were
knows if
saying
one of them
before.
did- right.
Back to Little League,
Right,
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those second graders not eligible to try out for my seventh grade team right now. They're not
Right.
eligible.
It's not within that window of time.
Right.
That's where the
But wait,
form.
what's
They
the
could be.
window?
But then
Right,
isn't,
there's a window.
Yeah,
I'm
how
an
far
eighth
back-
grader.
how far
I'm an
back
eighth
you're gonna go.
grader, right? And I could, so I'm gonna be eligible next year maybe. So then how far back do you
Right,
go?
right.
That's the question. So
I think that that's where the form maybe could be utilized and,
Right.
right? The determination could be made if there's a conflict.
If
In
it's
that,
not
in,
part-
if
yeah,
there's like a
that-
length
that-
of time in
that's-
between,
That's where the superintendent.
that's where the
steps in and
superintendent
says-
could step in, because it's
Okay.
not current. It's, right? There's time.
Right.
So I could certainly add language to the effect of where the student is eligible to try out for such coach's team and see if that works.
Okay.
I could try that, no problem.
And 4 was about owning or running an outside program, even if they were not the person directly coaching.
Sure. This is to John's point earlier, which is number 4, Rockville Center coach who is associated with an outside sports program. So we made this quite broad. So it doesn't
Be anything.
require direct coaching. You know, so if you're running the program, but you're not down in the trenches on the field with the kids every day, this actually requires that you let the boss, the superintendent, know about that. So again, we can make an informed decision as to whether that's problematic.
right.
So that's why I went with the word associated as opposed to, something more narrow, frankly.
Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you, Kara. Anything else?
On the policy?
Just on 6480?
Yeah.
Then we'll look at the form. So I think we have a good foundation, and I think we need some changes. Moving it from 1 to 2 would not be rushing that process. I think that we are getting there, so I'd like to move it to stage 2. That's okay with everybody? Okay, so we'll move that to stage 2. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to look at the forms. Can you wait until public mic time, Jeff? Because I got to set a good precedent. Thank you. We're going to go to the Form 6480, F, and then we have 1, 2, and 3. So these kind of coordinate to the new version of the policy. So these are redone to kind of work off of the wording of the policy. So let's take a look at these. And these are, again, separated for tutoring, coaching, and music instruction.
So again, please note that the major change to these forms is the third line down, I request permission to provide. And we made it quite clear in the policy itself that that is the condition proceeding to teaching, coaching, or providing music instruction. We want the boss to know about it before you actually start to provide those services.
So can we add something in these forms that's about what we were talking about earlier about past experiences? Because this is about type of service to be provided and scheduled to begin on, but is not so much about leaving an opportunity for somebody to talk about a relationship that may have existed in the past. It's more of a future form.
Right.
Okay, like even if
So,
there's
sure.
maybe
Well, but
one or
then
the
that's really
other.
like a notification.
Right,
form.
it's a notification
That's a
form,
notification,
right.
Like,
You're either
I did
about
this.
to do,
I know I did this already.
or I did
Right,
this. I
you're
think that that's
still
where we had
Right,
thought the
like
form
this-
would
this
also be,
child's
so,
coming.
yeah.
Agreed.
Right now, it's written as I'm going to do this. I'm asking permission to do this.
Right. And then it will be more reflective of the policy.
Right,
Well-
So the form should match the policy.
right.
Or how about something like this, after name of student, prior provision of services provided?
Yeah.
But if we're asking permission before, how do we know if they try out for the team, until they make the team, he or she won't be able to ask permission or explain permission. They'll just have to say, okay, now this person who I coached 3 years ago is on the team. But that's after the event. Like, they don't know that they'll make the team.
But there's that,
think that
he added that
tryout
eligible for tryout
tryout
piece
piece
in
we
the
just
last
added.
one, I think.
So we're gonna get, we
Yeah,
may
but-
get a ton of paperwork from a coach, because there may be 10 kids trying out for the team who he may have coached, and won't know till the first day of tryout, and then he'll have to submit the forms, and the superintendent will have to approve or deny, and while that kid is trying out, it's gonna make it, I don't know how to monitor that.
No,
That's a
right,
good
right,
point.
right.
That's a
Like
very
they,
good
you don't
point.
know, right, Carol, you don't know who's trying out till they,
Especially at middle school, where there are
Right.
75 kids
Yeah.
trying out for a team, how does a coach deal with something like that?
So if the child or children showed up the day of the tryout, would it be unreasonable to expect then the coach to go back to this and say, childs A through F that showed up today are kids I coached 5 years ago? I mean, would that be unreasonable to expect them to do it as, when they are aware, immediately aware?
Well, it's not unreasonable to ask it. You'd get the information, but then what happens if it's a conflict and now you're starting a season with 75 kids and no coach? Really, which was the position we were in this year. So that's the problem. So I don't know if we want to do two separate forms where it could be, I'm requesting permission to provide coaching and training in addition to my role as this outside coach. So that's one thing, because I'm already a coach and I'm in this position already, so I know kind of who I'm coaching. And then maybe the other form could be, prior to me being hired as a coach, I coached these Rockville Center kids.
So that's just a notification,
Correct.
not asking.
Correct.
Asking permission or asking to be approved for that, just to put it out there?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there are so many different scenarios when it comes to like summer camps. I work for a summer camp in Oceanside, and there's 40 kids that happen to sign up this summer. You don't know it. You're just a camp worker. And I now have, of the 40 kids, there's one kid from Rockville Center. I mean, those are the scenarios. You don't know who's coming into some of the outside programs if you're. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of weird scenarios that you honestly, I don't think you could really account for. And then it's the timeliness of it. So what am I doing now if it is determined? It's a battle to get coaches. So there aren't people knocking down the door. So if I end up at the start of a season, then I now am disappointing, those 75 other kids that may not be, they won't have a coach. It doesn't take 5 minutes to hire a coach, so, or qualified coach, let me.
But again, if that had happened further in the past versus I just did it in July and then
Right.
the kid showed, right?
Totally different story, yep.
Then if the superintendent had to make a determination based off of that and say, yes, you can still coach because you coached them 5 years ago and we don't see a conflict of
Right.
interest
And it was
directly
also
tied to this
unknowingly.
tryout,
Yeah.
then I think that's where the superintendent and this form can come into play. If you have somebody who's doing that the summer before they're about to try kids out, I think that's much more of a conflict, and I think that's what we're trying to limit. So I think that's where this form and the superintendent approval can work.
Come into play, absolutely.
Because we can't, I agree, we cannot get ourselves involved in things that are happening with kids in first grade programs. I mean, we just can't do it.
Agree with
But
that.
if somebody, oh, I know that kid, or I worked in that town, or whatever happened, that's where this form was supposed to be used, and then Dr. Johnson could say, this is 6 years ago, there's no direct, relationship here, I don't determine a conflict of interest. That would be different than
Yeah.
kind of things happening in that immediate time, right? I mean, that's the
I
way I
still
see
think
it.
you might need two different versions of this form, though.
Well, that's what we're saying.
Yeah,
One's
the
about
one
what's
in the-
happening and one's about what happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Prior to me being
Well,
hired.
I think we could do it on the same form, but just
Yeah.
separate it.
Okay.
Right, Chris? I think
Sure.
we can accomplish that and just do tutoring, coaching, music, and in the same regard, one future, about to, would like to, and then one that's like the past. So, okay. Anything else on the forms? So we'll match that to the policy, we'll add the wording, we'll move it with this to stage 2, and then we'll take another look at it next time. All right. Thank you so much. We're moving on to old business. I'd like to read a statement. The Board of Education received a letter today from an attorney who represents 3 Rockville Center School District families. The letter raises certain issues concerning the girls' varsity soccer tryouts. The board has asked the superintendent to undertake a review of the information provided and will decide what, if any, action must be taken to address the issues raised. The board will continue to review policies related to tutoring, coaching, and training of Rockville Center School District students, and that review had commenced tonight. So just wanted to let everybody know where we are there. As I mentioned the last time, we're really trying to make an effort to take what we learned through everything and move forward. Any information that's brought to us that's new, we would still always be considering, and that's what we're doing, as I just mentioned. But what became very clear to us in what we've been going through with conversations regarding athletics as a board is that we will be adding a board committee, an athletic advisory, that would be made up of members of the community, our athletic director, administrator, board members. So we will be we're in the process of kind of designing what that's going to look like, and in that process, we will put out more information on our website and push that out. That would have, if anybody's interested on how they could reach out to us to apply, you could do so through sending an email to the Board of Ed or through Jackie Wong, our district clerk, to start if you're interested in something like that. But, we do have committees that are really focused on curriculum and focused on drug and alcohol and special education, and we just felt it was time and very important to put together a community advisory for athletics. The Board of Ed meetings have become a place where people want to raise issues, and they should be able to do that always. But we want to make sure that when people come to Board of Ed meetings, we're not taken by surprise by certain things. And some of these committees are a really great way for us to get ahead of some of the issues that are out there in the community. Sometimes we just don't know. And we need people to come forward. I've said that the last few meetings. It's very important. And I think an advisory is a safe, nice place for people to do that. So even if you're not on the advisory, but you know somebody else is, I think that you could reach out to that person and say, could you please raise this question? Could you take a look at this? I saw this on our website. I was confused by this. So it's just another avenue, another forum for us to raise issues as a community in an appropriate way. So we've talked to Mrs. Rosetto about that, and we're going to be starting that soon. So you can look for information about that. One of the other things that the board feels really strongly about is support for all of our student athletes. And if any child in this district is going through anything in regards to athletics or anything, of course, with academics or anything, we really want to know that there is an opportunity for support for our students, and something we feel strongly about. And I would like the people on the advisory committee to specifically think about ways we can help some of our student athletes and what they're going through. It's a whole wide world out there, and we are very committed to the kids in the district, so I would like to put that to the advisory committee as well and make sure that we're doing a good job of reaching out to our kids.
Good evening, Salvatore Romanello, 128 DeMott. I know you have rules, but you also require us to state personal information. I assume that's okay.
That's
because I have
okay.
to state my name and my address, but accordingly.
You're talking about yourself.
Right,
It's
so
okay.
I think that's okay,
Yeah.
right? So one, I do appreciate the work that was put in on the conflict of interest forms. It's come a long way from where it's been, and the questions that you were directing are the issues that really, there's one major issue going forward that you have to figure out, and that is where there's an affiliation. Someone sets up a corporation or someone is affiliated, they still could have say over things, and that's what you have to
Right.
watch out about. And I'm glad that Mr. McCochet, amongst others, was focused on that. So it's a step in the right direction, and we do appreciate, I certainly appreciate that. The advisory council, I think that is a good thing. I think many times the athletic director is left alone without support, and it would be good to have 4 or 5 parents who could get the word out, could work with the athletic director, et cetera. So I think that's a good step. I would say you should look at what Manhasset did. They're about a year ahead of us.
Yeah, we saw it.
They had almost the same exact issue we had, and they took action and steps, and they put together a plan, and they're, if we can copy from them, we'll save a lot of time, I think. There are 2 things that I did want to mention and I thought could have been handled a little better. And I know there are legal implications, and Mr. Powers, if you ask around, he's one of the best education attorneys out there. And I know he advised this board publicly, so everyone heard it. He advised not to disclose what the vote was on a particular subject. I don't have to get into that, but perhaps legally that's correct. I'm not, saying it's not or it is or whatever, but I think it's really in the best interest of the community to have disclosure on those types of things. The board makes a vote. They should let the parents know. Was it a 3-2 vote? Who voted in favor? Who voted against? We elected you. We should know on those issues. And I'm not asking you to disclose that now. This is a community of goodwill. And, but when things like that happen, it undermines that goodwill. There's a lot of tension in this room. There's a lot of tension in the community. We know why it's there. We know certain policies probably could have been handled better, enforced better. They weren't. The process wasn't great. But we're entitled to know how you voted. It's really important. And I'm not saying legally. I'm saying as a matter of community and goodwill, you should let us know about those types of things. The last part, I understand the whole personnel issue and why we can't say things like that. And I've been very careful, okay? I've been very careful not to do that. But when that video pops up, someone sent me that video and said, oh my God, look at this. And there's a black screen. And no one's ever seen that before. Okay, and then you look at how many people were censored, and it wasn't just, hey, they mentioned this person and we're going to censor that portion of it. It was everything, and it wasn't done with notice. People didn't know that would necessarily happen. I understand why you want to have that policy, but there's a less restrictive way to do it, and it's to get rid of that portion of the discussion that that included the personnel issue. That would be much better. And so there were issues that were discussed where council was explaining things, but because the speaker at that time mentioned personnel issues, we didn't hear from your council. And really, as a community, it takes a lot to get here. This room's been packed. But there are a lot of people that actually want to see and watch and understand what happens. And you're taking that away when you censor the whole discussion. And so there is a less restrictive alternative, and I think it buys you more goodwill, because people will automatically jump and say, what are they hiding? Why are they doing it that way? It doesn't have to be done that way. So I just would implore you, it works both ways. When I moved to this town, there were issues, if you read the Herald every week, about the government in this town. I didn't know any of those folks, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And we got to an administration where I thought their view was, let's just treat the community, our customers, as a speaker last time mentioned. Let's treat them with respect. And so I think it would behoove the board to sometimes, when council perhaps says, hey, give them 3 days notice to do something, perhaps grant an extension for a week. Those types of things will buy a lot more goodwill. And I know you're all here because you want to do this. It is a lot of time, it's effort, and sometimes you have to make those decisions in a split second and don't think about the implications. But please, I think it's best for all of us if you just consider those types of things a little bit more carefully, and it will buy goodwill throughout the community. Happy holidays to everyone.
Before you leave, don't go, because I would like to thank you. I have to commend you. You're always very respectful and get your point across very eloquently, and it's the indication of what I was saying earlier. It's not that this board doesn't want to hear anything negative. There's things that we don't do well or perfectly, and people point them out to us, and we try to be better for it, but I just would like to say thank you to you. Every time you address us, you do it with respect, and it's supposed to be a two-way street. That's the environment we want to create here. So I
Yes.
appreciate that, and we hear you.
And I want to thank you for that. And I will say, though, when certain things happen and we are treated as we're in a litigation posture, like, hey, we're not going to give you an extension of time, that was for me hard to stomach.
And I understand.
Hard to believe. And I don't think it was because this board, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I think it was, hey, we got to do this really quickly, and you know, you have lawyers and they say X, Y, Z, et cetera. But it resonates. People hear that story and they say, how could that be? And it just can't be.
I know, and there's other variables too, right? So, and then there's a pressure situation happening, and then there's also the kind of urgency we feel to make sure that we're giving information in a timely manner, and we felt that pressure at that time too. When you came up the last time, I heard you loud and clear what you said, and I understand where you're coming from there, I really do. And apologize for that short time turnaround, because I understand where you're coming from. I do want you to understand that we also were taking it so seriously, and there was a matter of urgency coming from that side of the table, and I think we had everything lined up and set, and we were ready to go, and it was like, okay, let's get that information out. However, what I can say is, I hope you understand too, that while that might have closed at that point in time, that we're still open to information, as evidenced by, you know, this opening dialogue that we've had with each other. We have information you want to share with us still. We're still looking to take that information in. So we're not looking to close the door on anybody. I hope you can recognize we're trying to make positive steps in the right direction, and thank you for working with us.
But I'll add one last point on that. When the community sends an email to the board email address, and you don't get responses like received, forwarded to board.
I would like to apologize for that.
Needs to happen.
That happened after the cybersecurity thing. We lost that response and didn't know it for a
Well,
while.
it's just problematic.
Yes, it was a
right?
problem.
I believe
It was.
actually some of my early emails never made it there. I don't know why. I'm not
I know.
saying.
We did
and-
go through a very weird period, so I will acknowledge that, and I'm sorry that that happened. But we had members of the community who regularly write us, and honestly were the ones that said, I used to get a response that said, you received this, what happened? And that's how we knew, because we didn't realize that people weren't getting that, so we
Yeah, and the
apologize for
solution
that.
is to disclose it at a board meeting and let folks know that that is
Right.
going on.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just more about communication,
Yep.
because it's very, very frustrating to spend a lot of time drafting, sending an email to the board, and you hear nothing.
I apologize for
So-
that. We didn't realize that. We know now, but I think it's fixed, and if it's not, we need people to let us know, get in touch. I didn't hear anything, I didn't,
It went on for a while.
Okay,
Because people would
yeah.
say, they would write me, hey, I wrote the board, I didn't hear back. And
Okay.
I'm not sure how that process works.
Right.
I, don't know if it actually goes to all 5 of you, if it goes to a filter first, and then it goes
Yeah,
to
it
all
does.
5 of you. But, the community should know that if they're sending it there, does it get to the board?
it does go to a filter. I will say it goes to our district clerk, who then shares it. So if somebody writes us on a Friday night, we might not get it until Monday morning. So that is the way it typically would work.
Jack, how fast is that automatic response, right away?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had been.
Working for a while,
So
but
wh-
you would get it right away.
So what we can say, if somebody writes to the board and doesn't get a response, something's wrong. Please
Right.
contact
Right.
Jackie or contact, try again. It is an automatic process that lets you know that we received it and we're looking into it, so.
It was several months. I mean, the time span, at least.
I think it was definitely timed to that issue we were having with our email. Email was our most impacted area of the technology cyber attack that we had, so again, we apologize for that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. for
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, thank you.